Even as the first practical methods for aerial refueling were being developed, military planners had already envisioned what missions could be greatly enhanced by using such techniques. In the emerging Cold War climate of the late 1940s, the ability for bombers to perform increasingly long-distance missions would enable targets to be struck even from air bases on a different continent. Thus, it became commonplace for nuclear-armed strategic bombers to be equipped with aerial refueling apparatus and for it to be used to facilitate long-distance patrols. However, it is a little-known fact that the first successful aerial refueling trials were conducted by the German Air Force during World War II. The Junkers Ju-290 was a large German, four-engine long-range transport, heavy bomber and maritime patrol aircraft used by the Luftwaffe late in World War II. The Junkers Ju-290 was developed directly from the Ju-90 airliner, versions of which had been evaluated for military purposes. A special long-range reconnaissance group had been formed on July 1, 1943, and during the late summer of 1943 some of the new Ju-290s were delivered to its first squadron, which became operational at Mont-de-Marsan near Bordeaux on October 15 of that year. They flew their first operational missions in November 1943, shadowing Allied convoys in cooperation with U-boats, often remaining airborne for up to 18 hours. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, plans were made to connect Germany and Japan by air using Luftwaffe aircraft modified for very long-range flights. Commercial flights to the Far East by Lufthansa were no longer possible, and it had become too dangerous for ships or U-boats to make the trip by sea. To accomplish these ultra-long-range flights, Junkers project documents from 1942 to 1944 indicate that a Zwilling or twin variant was proposed. It was to be composed of 2 Ju-290 fuselages and powered by 8 BMW engines. 2 mounted on each outboard wing and 4 on the inboard wing. It was to carry a single Messerschmitt Me 328 jet Parasite fighter on top of the right fuselage for protection. But later the Ju-290Z was cancelled in favor of the Junkers Ju-390. The Junkers Ju-390 was a German long-range derivative of the Junkers Ju-290 aircraft, intended to be used as a heavy transport aircraft, maritime patrol aircraft and long-range bomber. The first prototype was modified from a Junkers Ju-90 airframe which was returned to the Junkers Company. This was done by adding an additional wing section and power plants and adding a fuselage section immediately aft of the wings to increase the length to 31 meters. It made its maiden flight on October 20, 1943 and performed well, resulting in an order in early 1944 for 6 more prototypes and 20 examples of the intended production version. None of these had been built by the time that the project was cancelled in mid-1944. According to the logbook of former Junkers test pilot, Hans-Joachim Panchers, the Ju-390 was brought to Prague and took part in a number of test flights between November 1943 and March 1944. These included tests of in-flight refueling. During the tests, a Junkers Ju-290 successfully refueled the Junkers Ju-390 in the air. This fact became the base of some exotic post-war speculations. The most famous one is the alleged New York flight of the aircraft. The first public mention of an alleged flight of a Ju-390 to North America appeared in the November 1955 issue of the British magazine RAF Flying Review. The magazine's editors were skeptical of the claim, which asserted that 2 Ju-390s had made the flight and that it included a 1-hour stay over New York City. In March 1956, the review published a letter from an RAF officer which claimed to clarify the account. According to Green's reporting, in June 1944, Allied intelligence had learned from prisoner interrogations that a Ju-390 had been delivered in January 1944 to a base at Mont-de-Marsan near Bordeaux and that it had completed a 32-hour reconnaissance flight to within 19 kilometers of the U.S. coast, north of New York City. The reports claimed that the Ju-390 had taken photographs of the coast of Long Island, but no photos or other evidence for the existence of such photos has ever been found. According to Pancher's logbook, the Ju-390 was brought to Prague on November 26, 1943. While there, it took part in test flights which continued until late March 1944. They also assert that the Ju-390 prototype was unlikely to have been capable of taking off with the fuel load necessary for a flight of such duration due to strength concerns over its modified structure. It would have required a takeoff weight of 72 short tons, while the maximum takeoff weight during its trials had been 37 short tons. Another explanation for this is that prototypes are never flown at maximum gross weight for their maiden flight until testing can determine the aircraft's handling. But in theory the aircraft could have reached New York if it had been refueled during its flight. In reality the Ju-390 was returned to Dessau in November 1944, where it was stripped of parts and finally destroyed in late April 1945 as the U.S. Army approached. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you and see you in the next video.